We've asked our listeners to write in their food rules inspired by your eat food, not too much, mostly plants. How did you come up with that rule?
Well, it was a kind of an unusual journalistic experience for me. Normally, when you start drilling down into a subject, it turns out to be more complicated than you thought, and I was learning all about nutrition and health. And this one, the deeper I went, the simpler it got. And I realized, you don't have to know all this about antioxidants and carbohydrates and everything. And it really is just about eating food, which was a little alarming because I'd promised my publisher 50 or 60,000 words, and I only had 7. But it turned out that nutrition is simpler than we've been led to believe.
You recently asked readers to write in their food rules in the New York Times website. Have you been receiving a flood of suggestions?
We got 2,500 food rules from people. Great stuff. I'm still sifting through it all. The reason I'm doing that is, the end of In Defense of Food has a section of rules of thumb. Don't eat anything your grandmother wouldn't recognize as food. But I realized that there is this whole cultural repository of food wisdom that we've denigrated. I mean, things we heard from our parents or grandparents or great-grandparents. And that really culture may have more to teach us about how to eat than medicine right now. So I'm trying to collect these and preserve them, whatever wisdom there is.
I would assume that some interesting things come in from people who are recent immigrants, because they would have a very different view of how food works than the people who've lived here a long time and gone through all of those changes, post-World War II changes.
Yeah, there are. I mean, the sad thing is that they very quickly lose their food culture. Our food culture is very seductive and very glamorous. And so very often within a generation, you see the children certainly adapting to the fast food world. And the parents sometimes will hold on for a while. Certain ethnic groups, in my experience, have resisted better than others. I'm really surprised. I teach at Cal at Berkeley, and the Indian students that I teach very often are still grinding their own spices. They're university students who are actually like cooking from scratch every day, and that they have a very strong taboo on adopting our food and are much healthier for it.
Can't we be seduced by food that's good for us? Why does it have to be unhealthy?
It's the difference between, fast, cheap, and easy superficial pleasures and deeper pleasures. I mean, slow food is all about pleasure too, but it's a slower pleasure, and it's not as immediately appealing, although it's more lasting. I mean, I try fast food from time to time because I'm trying to understand the phenomenon. And the difference between the first bite of a chicken nugget or a Big Mac and the third or fourth or fifth bite is dramatic. It really is engineered for a satisfying and interesting first bite, and then it gets really lousy fast.
But why is it cheap? Because I've heard arguments that say, well, it depends on how you want to pay. You can either pay for well-done produce that's farmed correctly, and the prices, some people say, are a little high, and they're elitist, or you can get cheap food, but it's been subsidized. You're paying for the carbon footprint, and you're also perhaps paying later when you have to go to the doctor.
Well, that's right. The cheap food is exorbitant when you really consider the costs. We shouldn't call it cheap food. We should call it freeloader food or something like that, because it really is. It depends on the subsidies for the corn and the soy that creates all the fast food. It depends on the fact that we're using up our antibiotics by wasting them on farm animals that and I shouldn't call them farms, factory farm animals. That's a huge public health expense coming. It obviously costs the environment a great deal. It contributes greenhouse gases. But at the register, it is still cheap. I mean, it's remarkable that you can buy, a very large meal for less than the cost of working at the minimum wage for 1 hour.